All right, if you're working from home during the lockdown, you may be able to claim for home office expenses from the Revenue Service. SARS says it may accept claims if you have worked from home for at least 6 months since the start of the lockdown. So what are the parameters? Joining me via Skype is David French from tax consulting group SARS. David, thanks very much indeed for talking to us. First of all, as I understand it, in order for this claim to be processed or even considered, one has to demonstrate that a part of the home was used for the office or work activities.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. Yes, it's a little bit stricter than people might believe it to be. The requirement, other than we generally call it 6 months, but the law says I think it's the majority of, not majority, more than half anyway, most of your time. But also, if you're going to be claiming the so-called home expenses, and we're talking about a part of the interest on your bond, your rates and taxes, the area that you use must be used solely and exclusively for the work. Now, this might be a small problem for some people. In my particular case, I've been working from home since mid-March, and I might be coming up for this. But in my study with me is my 13-year-old daughter. She has to use a computer here for her schooling. Now, the question is, will SARS accept that this workspace is exclusively for my work? I'm not very sure.
Let me ask you this here. What type of typical items could one claim for under these circumstances?
Okay. The idea is behind the workspace is your interest on your bond, if you have any, part of your rates and taxes, or your electricity, that type of thing. You could also probably try and claim if you have stationery, printing costs, that type of thing, where you are bearing the cost yourself. Your employer is not paying it for you. So some employers will pay for the paper and the ink. There you can't claim it. So it's some stationery costs, the costs of your electricity, the costs of running the office effectively.
But David, there's a caveat to this, isn't there? Because even though you can make the claim, SARS will record the space that you used for your office activities, and you will be negatively affecting any capital gains relief, as I understand it, should you sell your property in that period.
This is the big thing in our lives, and it's not just within the period, it's forever thereafter. It's based on the floor space. You'd normally use the floor space to apportion your expenditure. So if you have 100's worth of electricity and you have, call it 20% of the house is the office, that's a nice big office, you'd take 20% of your 100 and you'd claim that. When you get to selling your house, then we have never remember this, I always call it personal use assets, and what's my private residence? We have the exemption for it. And if we claim our home office expenses, that part of the house doesn't qualify for this exemption. So we have to carve that out from my capital gains tax. And that carries forward. So even if I claimed it for 1 year, then I must do a calculation on my floor space and the life of my that I've held the house. And I have to carve that portion out, and I will be taxable on a portion from a capital gains tax point of view. That could be more, in fact, than what I claimed in expenditure.
Yeah, it's onerous, and perhaps one has to consider very, very, very deeply before such a move. Before I let you go, though, just very, very quickly, what happens in instances where your employer is reimbursing you for a number of items? And I think you've mentioned this before, like data costs, for example. How does that affect the equation?
The data costs are interesting. There are certain exemptions. We have our fringe benefits to start off with. So I like to use the cell phones. Your employer gives you a cell phone. You have private use of that cell phone. There should be a fringe benefit on that private use, but there is some carve out for that where you're using the cell phone mainly for business purposes. They don't bring in your personal use element of it. The same type of thing can happen with data costs. Employer reimburses for data costs, or let's make it even better. The employer pays for your data costs, so they supply you with that data. That can be supplied to you under certain circumstances without you ending up being taxable on it. So there are ways of helping to set up people with the Home Office. We're doing it in a couple of situations now. We're looking at it where firms are saying the new normal is working from home. How best to do it? If the employer can give you a nice chair for you to use. Again, you're using it mainly for your office and very little for personal use. It can be done free of tax.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. David French is from the tax consulting group Mazars. Thanks very much indeed, David, for talking to us.